This section will include a couple of family stories. This one I'll just call The Skunk's Last Laugh. We used to plant a garden including corn in our backyard, and one year I noticed that quite a few of the corn cobs, when they got ripe, were bent over, and 2 or 3 rows of corn would be eaten off and then they'd be left. And we'd smell skunks every once in a while. Didn't see many of them, but we could smell them, and I knew it was the skunk. And I looked at a place where I thought he was probably living down in some rocky sections of the side of the hill next to the tennis court. And so I decided, I had a bright idea that we'd go get the skunk. So I got 1 or 2 of the boys with me, and we had it all figured out. We had a stick with a couple of smoke bombs on them. I had the .22 and a couple of people with flashlights, and so what we were going to do was stick the smoke bomb in the skunk's hole, and when he came out we'd shoot him, and that'd be the end of the skunk. Well, we went down there and everything was going fine, put the smoke bombs on the stick and lit them and stuck them down in the hole, and jumped back to see if any skunks were coming out. No skunks ever came out, and for some reason I left the .22 rifle down there. Just left it down there propped against something down below. I went down there about 10:30 at night to retrieve the rifle, and as I did, the flashlight was there. I had the flashlight with me, and I could hear some rustling over in the corn, so I thought, oh, there's that little culprit, I'll go get him right now. So I went over there with the rifle and with the flashlight, and I kind of held the flashlight along with the barrel, and sure enough, there was the skunk, and he was in the corn. I was about 20 feet away, so I took a few quick shots, semi-automatic .22, boom, 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 and then I ran away. But I was not fast enough to get away from that smell. That skunk perfume went in the air, and it got in all my clothes, and I hustled up on the deck, and I had to take all my clothes off except for my undergarments, and left them out there to air out. And then we finally had to wash them. We did get the skunk and had the city come and get him, but the skunk got the last laugh on us, I think. Our dog Butchie Butch, who was very famous, used to love to play with the ball, and just a quick little thing on Butch, he would chase the tennis ball, and you could throw it off the top deck down 40-foot elevation drop, and he'd go get it, and he'd retrieve it a few times, but whenever he'd bring the ball back to you, he'd always keep it in his mouth. He kind of wanted you to get it, but he kind of wanted to hang on to it himself, so he'd keep the ball in his mouth, and when you reached for the ball, he would cover up his nose with his paws like this and try to keep you from getting the ball away from you, which was kind of a funny little thing he would do. Everybody in the family remembers Cootie the magpie. That was a little baby magpie that Travis and Bryce Wilson had retrieved from a nest. There were 2 of them that I guess the mother had been killed by some other boys down there, and they brought 2 home. One of them died, but Cootie lived, and we raised it to an adult magpie, and we never clipped its feathers or anything. It was really a great bird, smart bird. And we used to feed it dog food. We'd soften the pellets in warm water and feed it dog food. And I always joked with the kids that we needed to next teach Cootie how to fetch the newspaper and bark at strangers. They never could quite teach it to do that, however. One time, this will be entitled Fireworks Under the Bed. One time Blake had been, being the observant person that he is, he had watched very closely while Travis and Dallas, maybe Jordan, they had a bad habit of taking illicit fireworks, primarily bottle rockets, and they would hide in their bedroom, and then they would open the window a little crack, and they would put those in a pop bottle, and they would light them and shoot them at cars that would be coming across on Granite Hills Circle. And Blake watched them very close. He knew where the fireworks were, he knew where the matches were, he knew how to light things, and he was 4 years old, maybe 3 and a half. Anyway, one day he decided he'd try the fireworks, so he got under the bed, shut the door so Mother couldn't catch him. I guess he even had a conscience back then. lit some of the fireworks. They went off and started going, and pretty soon the carpet was on fire and the bed and everything was on fire. And then it was getting so smoky in there he had to get out, so he opened the door. The fire alarm went off. Joan came in. There were flames all over the place. She stamped them out in her bare feet, as I remember. And anyway, that was the day that Blake burned down Dallas's bedroom. Pretty memorable time in our family's history. One of the most memorable times, not the most pleasant, but in 1995 on a Friday evening, I believe it was in about November, Joan and I had gone out for just a casual dinner. The two of us came home on a Friday night about 10 o'clock, and as we got to the door, Dallas opened the door. His face was as white as if he'd seen a ghost, and he said, "Come on in here, come on in the garage, Dad." And I knew he had crashed our Dodge Ram Charger, which was the only car that was at home. When I got out there, it looked like the car, Giant had just punched it right in the front, just punched one side of it right in. And that was the good part of it. And I said, "Oh, what happened, Dallas?" He says, "I hit a fire hydrant." I said, "What did the police say?" He said, "I don't know, I didn't stay." I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, when I hit it," he said, "all this water and rocks and dirt and everything started flying and spraying up." He says, "I had to get out of there." So he said, Monica and, what was her name?
Amber.
Not Amber, no, it was Johnson, Andrea. Monica and Andrea Johnson were with him. He says, "I told Monica and Andrea I'd kill them if they told anybody." He said, "I hit reverse and backed all the way up to 31st East, and then I came down the other way and came in the garage." And I said, "What time did that happen?" He says, "About 7:30. And I said, "You got your license and your coat with you?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, come on, let's go." So Mother and I and Dallas jumped in the car. It was a pretty serious time. And we didn't get very far. We started up Mount Jordan Road. We asked him where it was. He said, "Well, it was right up where Cheyenne comes down to Mount Jordan Road." And we didn't get very far because there was a police car blocking it off. There had been a gigantic flood there. And I got out of the car, said to the policeman, "Got a broken fire hydrant here?" And he says, "Yep." And I said, "Well, my son's the one that knocked the fire hydrant over, and he's right here. We just barely got home." And he says, "Hang on a second." He gets in his patrol car and he says to the other officer, "I've got your hit and run up here. I've got him in custody. Come on down." He's calling for backup. I guess he was wondering whether it was going to be real serious. So two officers came. They followed us down to the house, took a report. It took them a long time. They were kind of reminiscing, and it wasn't really a get the paperwork done type report, but they finished it up. And then Joan and I, not Dallas, but Joan and I went back up, and they had shut off power lines. They'd shut off the natural gas lines, Mountain Fuel, and there were people all over the place, and emergency people, because there had been, you'll see them in the photographs, there had been a giant amount of asphalt and dirt and everything that had washed out of there because it was a steep hill going up to the fire hydrant. In fact, Dallas made 9 o'clock Fox News, and then the next day he made front page of Section B with a picture about that big. Underneath the picture it said, "Teen's error creates geyser and canyon." Well, when we went up there that night about 11:30 to look at it, it was disastrous. We did not admit right then that it was us and our son that was responsible for it, but it was a big deal, and the power and the gas was off for around 24 hours. And then what was a little interesting, about 2 weeks later, Glacial Park Ward, the ward in which this event happened, and our sister ward in the same building, they had an emergency preparedness fair, and of course this was great news for that. So they took that article that was normally about that big, and they enlarged it up to giant, put it on 2 huge posters, one in each foyer, and they had a big new title it had on it that said, "Are you prepared for a disaster like this?" And that went on for about, it took it took several months to get that resolved because our insurance was limited due to Travis's driving and only being able to get a certain amount of property damage. And as I recall, it was a $15,000 maximum. It wasn't, no, it was $25,000 maximum, and it was $41,000 worth of damage, but the city was negligent because it took them 2 hours to turn off the broken valve, and the fire hydrant had been set too high. It's supposed to break off above the valve. It's called a frangible valve, but it broke off below the valve, and that's the reason for the disaster. And it was it's amusing now, but it was a big disaster in our family at the time. One other brief flood. One New Year's morning, New Year's Day, January 1st, would have been about 1992. I was in the office and I didn't have my glasses on. I looked out and it looked like there were fumes coming out from one of our cars that was parked out on the curb. But when I put my glasses on, it was actually water running, and I thought, what on earth is water doing, running, a lot of water, running down the curb or in the gutter on January 1st. Went up, and it was actually a major 6-inch broken main that just happened to burst under pressure in front of George Richards' house, and it was the water would surge on and off, and it was just a small stream, and then the pressure would surge, and it just finally, it was just at the exact wrong angle, the split in the cast pipe, and it just shot a giant stream of water about 80 feet, and it went right in George and Pat's bedroom window and caused about $20,000 worth of damage. Just a major accident. And that's the last flood story that I have today.